Hey everyone, it's Barbara with the first of my In the Background series tutorials. Today I'm going to be making a watercolor wash background with my favorite things, inks. I'm using ink refills, but you can just as easily use your ink pads if you don't have refills. I'm using Berrylicious ink, sour apple ink, and Blu Raspberry ink. I'm also going to be using some watercolor paper. My favorite is the Ranger watercolor paper for a couple of reasons. First, it's pure white. And secondly, it has texture on one side and the other side is smooth. That way you have a really good choice. I love the texture for watercolor, and the smooth side is great for stamping. I'll be showing you that in another video, but I'm using the textured side for this video. You'll also need a brush to apply water. An art brush will work just fine, but I really recommend a water brush because it gives you a lot better control. And you have the water right there at your fingertips. Here's how you fill a water brush. You just squeeze the barrel, dip it down in water, let the water suck up, and then repeat until it's full. To release water, all you have to do is give the barrel a little squeeze, and you're good to go. You'll also need a little spray bottle. I'm using a mini mister, but any spray bottle with a fine mist will work. All the supplies will be listed at the end of my blog post and also on my YouTube description. So let's get started. I've cut my watercolor paper to A2 size, which is 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. And since I have an idea percolating in the back of my mind for my card design, I'm going to be working on the tall view. The paper will warp once it's wet, and since I know I'm going to be trimming this panel down before I use it, I'm going to tape down the very edges to a clipboard with painter's tape so that to minimize the warping as much as I can. Now I'm going to spritz it with my spritzer. You want a moderately wet surface to work with here. Too dry and your paper will grab too much of the ink, too wet and it will run too much. Depending on your colors, if that happens, your colors can get muddy, so middle of the road is good. I do find that keeping your colors on either on the cool side or on the warm side will cut down on that muddiness risk. Next, I put a drop of my favorite things Blu Raspberry ink refill on my non-stick craft sheet. I'll pick up a little with my water brush and then start applying it to the paper. The water on the paper will make it flow, puddle, and drip to create interesting looks. There's no real science to this. You just put it on and see what happens. I'll do the same thing with my favorite things sour apple ink refill. Putting some on my water brush, and then I'll apply it just above the first color. Sorry it's off the screen there a little bit. And let it run and drip down into the first color. It looks a little rough right now, but we're not done. Another great thing about taping your paper down to a sturdy portable surface is that you can pick it up and tilt it to help the color run and puddle. Now repeat that step with my third color, Berrylicious. If you don't have refills, you can just smoosh your ink pad on the craft sheet and pick up ink from there with your brush. Once I have all three colors laid down, I like to go back over and add either more water from my water brush or more ink, whichever I think it needs, sometimes both. Just work with it and get the look that you want. Again, there's no science to this, just play with it and have fun. And it's almost hard to get too much ink on there as long as your surface is wet, because your water brush, if you give it a squeeze, it'll just wash it right off. little more Berrylicious at the top, and encourage some drips. There. I think that's good. So I will just blot up the excess now. And clean off my craft mat so I don't get that ink on anything. And set it aside to dry. When it's dry, I'll remove the tape and use it on my project. You can speed up the drying by using a heat tool, but I find that it will dry flatter if you let it dry naturally. For my card, I'm using a piece of Sweet Tooth cardstock, cut A2 size with a top fold. I'm going to be adding a tag, cut with my favorite things, pierced Traditional Tag STAX Die-namics, and a butterfly cut from Lisa Johnson Designs Blissful Butterflies Die-namics. The stamp set is Lisa Johnson Designs Blissful Butterflies. So first of all, I'm going to stamp a sentiment at the bottom of the tag. I'm using steel gray ink. Sorry about my head there. And I'll set that aside while I stamp my butterfly. I find that when you're trying to stamp on a die cut with the matching image, and on light paper, it works a whole lot better for me if I put it on top of something dark. It helps me to line up the edges better. So I'm inking my butterfly up with Berrylicious premium dye ink. Sorry about the head again. And stamping the butterfly. I also like to kind of crease the butterfly's body to give the wings a little dimension. Now back to the tag. I think I'm going to put some cord through the top of the tag, so I need to punch a hole. But I think I better mark it with a pencil first. Maybe a little off center, but it'll be okay in the end. I didn't want to stick my head in the way again, guys. So I'm going to use some May Arts silver cord tied through the top. And now let's look at the paper. It's still a little damp, so I'm going to use my heat tool very carefully, constantly in motion, so as not to overheat any one place. You will see the pattern emerge even more once it's dry. The little runs and drips seem to take on more definition, and it takes on an overall marbling effect. I really love this look. It's a subtle background, but it adds so much to a card. Painter's tape is a great medium to use for taping down paper, because it will not tear your paper if you're careful anyway. It's still a tiny bit damp, so I'm going to zap it one more time. See how it's curling up a little bit with the heat tool? When it does that, all you do is flip it over and heat the other side, and it pretty well flattens out. Okay. So now I'm going to trim 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So my paper will end up being 5 inches by 3 3/4. there you go. There is your watercolor paper. See the texture? I love how it looks like real watercolor. And let's just lay out the card just to kind of see what it's going to look like. Okay, now let's put it together. I like to use a good deal of foam tape on the back of these watercolor panels, because if they're warped just even a little bit, it will help to keep the panel flat. And I find that the longer strips rather than dots helps that a lot more. Now we'll apply that to the card front, checking to make sure that I have it oriented properly. Ask me why. Adhere that, and now we're going to adhere the tag the same way, only dots are fine for this. One more and we're ready to go. Pull the backing off. I find those little pieces of backing everywhere in my house. Adhere that to the front, and then I like to use a little strip of foam tape to the back of the butterfly also to add a little more dimension. Now I think it needs a little something else, so I pulled out a few sequins. I'm just going to lay them out temporarily to get an idea of what I want them to look like. Also a couple of clear gems. I like to mix and match those with the sequins. Yeah, that's better. I love that little pickup tool. It is Krystal Katana, and it's sticky on the end, and it works really well if you actually touch the item. And then it helps you position things like sequins, gems, enamel dots into place. I'm adhering those with a Quickie Glue Pen. I've not had any trouble with sequins falling off using a Quickie Glue Pen. I know some people have trouble keeping sequins on, but I've not had any trouble with the glue pen. Now I don't really like the way that cord is just laying there curled up, so I think I'm going to see what I can do with that. I'm going to distress it up a little bit. It won't curl like, you know, ribbon does, but I'm just going to distress it. And that will give that a little interest as well. And there you go. I hope you found my first in the background video tutorial helpful, and I hope you'll give this technique a try. Every background you do with this technique will look different. There's no right way to do it, and it's so much fun to see how each will turn out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel, as I have lots of plans for adding future video tutorials.